Hello, relatives. I'm so honored that you're able to join us today we're here with Lakshi Richard Huyamani, two dogs, and he's going to be giving us a teaching today on cultural confirmation. And this teaching, we're just really, really grateful and honored to be learning from Lakshi. He teaches us so much, and this knowledge helps the youth and the families that we're working with and helping heal our people. And it may just be one teaching at a time, but it truly is making a generational impact for us as a people. So Mopila, Lakshi, for all that you do and for sharing this knowledge with us. And so
Mm,
I'll I'll go ahead and pass it off to you, Lakshi.
okay. All right. Before we start, I'll say a prayer and then I'll go to my PowerPoint. Otkakashla ampetu oastichaki wanyako minka wopila. Unkeni chapi, dono unkitakwe, kujapi, dono unkitakwe. Ukdeo ungana onya pi teata kuzfaya na isu kuziti vikdakfaya pi kena kicha. Uchunki ksapi. Na trecha ea auki deno. Uchocha nena uspeo na trokata ki harmoni ukdaheche. Machinwa ki. Ukhaheche Wichikignonia el oha hoheche mnishicha na pejishicha ea heche oyate ki kashkawi chaiza cha hecha ki ota makawi choni ayustampi kak dokia niuk diecha akpania tapelot kasha tefik hoheche wash awanyaki ampetu ileel heche ampetu wanji el heche hena wanichinkta heche hoibaro ometakas.
Mopila.
Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes. It's Lakshi.
Okay. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about conflict transformation. Uh, Okoki chapi etan Okoki chapi etan gluashtapi. Okoki chapi is like when somebody has conflict with each other. Like historically, it was like within our band, we lived together in what we call extended families, called tioshpai. So in this time of our lives and the history of our people, we had men like these ones that are pictured here, and these are seven warriors that survived that fought at the Little Bighorn, and this was taken in the early 1950s. Uh, I think it was at Custer State Park. Um, so the conflict among our people and what they talk about is a transformation into finding a way to resolve it. So okoki chapi means to be there's conflict like among people, and it happened being as humans, everything there's a conflict. Sometimes there's sometimes there's different things that come in there that cause conflict. Even it's more so probably today than it was in our ancestors' time. So okoki chapi is that means means the conflict. Etan gloashtepi means to make it right in some way. So what does conflict transformation mean? In this sense, conflict transformation is a term that describes a natural occurrence. Conflicts change relationships in predictable ways, altering communication patterns of social organization, altering images of the self and of the other. Conflict transformation is also a prescriptive concept. So even the Ocheti Shakoi was formed through this process in a sense that mm, there was conflict between people among our own people, and they branched off and formed their own bands, their own uh, fireplaces, so to speak. So there was a conflict around outside of, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this place, but there's a park outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota, towards the um, south, kind of southwest in that area somewhere. There's some petroglyphs, and that's where we came together as a people, and there was a conflict between the Nakotas, the Dakotas, and the Lakotas, the Al speakers. So they branched off, and the Lakotas kept moving west. The Dakotas stayed in that area, and the Nakotas migrated towards the north, where they eventually, some of them, went into Canada. So that was one of the reasons why we broke up into three dialects of Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, which is the seven council fires, or Ocheti Shakome, as they say today. So that's what happened to us. And that's how we formed. But also through visions of holy men did we based our Ocheti Shakome on the Big Dipper, seven stars of the Big Dipper. Also, there's seven spiritual laws with each star of the Big Dipper. So our a lot of our social organizations and political organizations are based on the Big Dipper. So so this is how we came to be where we are in our social and political foundation. So there's three types of conflict and how to address them. There's task conflict, relationship conflict, and value conflict. So these are what our people dealt with on a daily basis. Uh, and when there was a conflict between people, uh, the the ultimate thing was to igluaste, to make it right. Um, and that was like say relationship conflict would be like it was maybe there was a dispute between two tiospais or two families, and there was usually an exchange of gifts. And they say that if you accept the gift, then you can't continue to harbor ill will or bad feelings. Uh, and so this is how we based how we resolved situations a lot of times. Uh, so being the last class, I'd like to engage the audience and ask them how they see task conflict, and what are ideas on how you would resolve that, like say in a community or even in a workplace. A lot of these concepts um, can be can arise in workplace situations. So anybody is free to jump in at any time. So that question is out there now. How do you see task conflict, and how would you make a suggestion on how you would resolve it? Okay, Trojan Hattie, if you're talking, you're on mute. Are you talking, Trojan? Trojan Val, can you see her? So a solution by Joey, uh, Coach Joey, is a solution could be here to start by hearing both sides of the conflict. Okay, that's a good answer. And I've seen Hattie raise her hand, but I don't hear her. Coach Val, do you see her? Or you could put it in a chat also if you can't. get your mic to work or whatever. Okay, your chat is disabled. It might be on your side, Val, their chat is disabled. Hold on, I'll contact you. Sorry for the delay. Okay, we'll move on then. Wait, I see somewhere in the chat.
Lakshi, there are some in the chat. It says, Joey said, a solution could be here to start by hearing both sides of the conflict.
Okay. Their sounds like their chat is disabled.
They could put it into the Q&A.
Okay. I wanted to hear their voices.
Oh, you want to hear them? If they raise their hand, I can go ahead and put them. Yeah. So
Okay.
if someone wants to talk, go ahead and raise your hand and I can get you off of mute. All right, here we go. We got Hattie.
Okay, raise it. We're listening, Boja.
Okay. Can you say the question again? Lost
So
track of
like
my.
say past conflict, what is it? What would be an example of that, and what is your suggestions on how to resolve it? One way
Oh,
to resolve it.
oh, okay. I grew up always being with my mom, and my mom
Mm-hmm.
and my extended family, they were really into tribal leadership and politics and things like that. No matter if it was at church or community or home or whatever. And they did have disagreements, and they would
Mm-hmm.
all have a chance to say their their part of what they thought and what their belief was about the issue.
Yeah.
And then they would all talk, but they didn't talk over each other. And then if someone did, then someone would like knock on the table or, you know, distract them from that. And then they'd go back to taking turns.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would come up with a consensus of what the decision was.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, if you didn't agree with it still, you weren't, it was disrespectful to yourself to pout.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have respect for yourself and your family, you have to accept it. And then when it's over, you shake hands, and then that means you let it go.
Mm-hmm.
You don't carry on. But I noticed since my younger years of watching conflict between adults and then my years of being an adult, it's not like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we forgot how to self-manage ourselves. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we continue to argue our point, even when the situation is mute, we
Mm-hmm.
still carry on. And then all it does is create bad feelings. And in today's professional world, it makes you to be marked as a bad employee or a disgruntled employee or a hard person to work with in the community. And so people don't really want to invite you to the Omnichia.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess it's real important to how teach ourselves how to self-manage and to remember respect.
Mm-hmm. Oh, shit. Okay, now we have a value conflict. So what's an example of that, and what is a suggestion on how to resolve it? Anybody have any comments? Okay, somebody raised your hand. Okay.
I did, like she, and it looks like someone just wanted to have you repeat the question, and you just kind of mentioned a value conflict. And so for me, I mean, it's our own perceptions of what our values are and those types of things, but it could be for me as an Indigenous person, just like the value of community and collectivism and how we really look for one another. And like that's a true value. That's how I lead, is by community. And I do see in the Western world, it's very much individualistic and it's for one own's gain instead of the whole collective of our people, you know. And so
Mhm.
to me that's kind of that value collective that maybe us as Indigenous people have versus Western society.
Mhm.
And then it looks like someone wants to talk. Wania, Waniakia. Let me get you off of mute. You just have to raise your hand if you want to talk. All right. And you should be able to talk now too.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just saying, can you mute me?
Oh,
Yeah.
but do you want to give an example of what a value conflict would look like, or it could look like to you?
Mm, I don't think about that one.
All right, we have Hattie who wants to visit again. I'll go ahead and allow her to talk. Go ahead.
This one is really actually present conflict for me. And so, and I don't mean to insult anybody, I'm just being honest. So we have a lot of relatives that are having problems with alcohol and drug addiction, and they're in public, and sometimes they participate in things, and then sometimes they get carried away and it becomes a nuisance type of behavior. And so my conflict is I'm assuming that today the the accepted thing is to allow them to just be that way. Whereas when I was growing up, it wasn't any different. We had people with alcohol and drug issues, and they would participate in things, and then pretty soon their behavior became a nuisance. And so a relative would make them sit down, or sometimes they had to escort them out of the whatever was going on, and then they would scold them, not to shame them, but to scold them like you would your relative, because you want them to learn that, sometimes you can't be doing that. And so the value conflict there is, do we still help our relatives regulate their behavior, or is it today that that's no longer the accepted thing? You're supposed to just let them have freedom of speech and expression, no matter if they have, I don't know. Do you know what I'm asking? It's like that's my value conflict right now. And this whole thing about decolonizing and all that is new. Some of us never learned those concepts in this modern world. We just try to manage and try to be Lakota where we can. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Makes sense. I see that a lot in a community also, and it seemed like to me, like as the elders pass away, older people, then that it's almost like, as they say, there's a saying that everything tends towards chaos. And it seems to go in that direction everywhere you go. I don't care if it's a powwow or a ceremony, or because there's those the elders that are there to remind you. They not only will they talk to you, they call it wahokumkia, but they'll tell you why that rule is there in place, why you don't do that. So that's missing today in our society. So there has to be a constant reminder, because also I've seen that in sun dances is there was be some kind of a I guess teaching or a law about why you don't do something. But if you don't constantly remind people, then they're gonna drift back towards it again. And so they have to be constantly reminded, because we live in two worlds, I think, and sometimes they contradict each other, like as Lakotas, we're not supposed to stare at whoever is talking. We listen, but we don't stare at them, because in our society, when you stare at somebody, that's like confrontational. But the Washichu world, if you don't look at them, then they see that as disrespectful. So, and we see it as disrespectful to stare at somebody. So, that's a conflict there. So that's a good point, Rojan, that you brought up. So we'll move on to value conflict. So what is value conflict? And what is a example of how we could, how example of what it is, and then a suggestion on how we would resolve something like that, or attempt to. My take on it is we see it all of the time, in a sense that the one that I like to, that not don't like to, but the one that I hear a lot is, I didn't come to the Inipi because I wasn't feeling well. So that doesn't make sense to me, because that's when you would come to the Inipi, because you would come and you would get a healing. Or I heard another one that said, I didn't come to the Sundance because I didn't like those guys that are singing there. So what do you value? Come there, make prayers because of the power and the spirits that are there, and come there and pray and try to get a healing of some type, of insight of some type, instead of uh, allowing your own dislikes and like that to overrule what your behavior. So I see that a lot. uh, I remember, and I'm not gonna name names, but there was this young man who belonged to the Tokala Society, and he talked to us sitting there at the Inipi about how it was at Bear Butte, and how he became a Tokala, and how they came and got him and gave him teachings and all of this. And then when it was time to go to Inipi, he said, "Oh, I can't go in because I have to drive these children back to town." So I was thinking, why didn't he just come in with us and bring the children too? So that's always happening in our society. There's always that conflict. What do you value more? Do you value healing more? Do you value putting the children first, the old people, the infirm? They say the ohunkeshne, that's what they call them. The people that are old, are the children, are the ones that maybe have a physical disability or something. In our society long ago, we put them first. So when we moved camp, the old people and the sick people, like, determined the pace of how quick we moved. If they move slowly, then we move slowly. Today, our people would probably leave everybody behind to help, and not wait up for anybody, because we've lost that in the assimilation and the colonization of our people. And so that's to me an example of the value conflict. So if anybody else has anything to add to that, or uh, I'm up, I'm listening.
And anyone can raise their hand too if you want to speak, or the chat is enabled now too, so you can post your questions and your comments in the chat for Lakshya Rick as well.
Must be clear as mud, as they say.
Patty said estrangement from children.
What's
That's
that?
estrangement from children. That's a conflict.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on it, Twitter?
Go ahead, Hattie. He should be able to talk. Oh, Dennis. I put Dennis on there. Hold on. There we go.
Estrangement from children. That's parents not bonding with their kids and leaving it to their extended family to raise, and not participating in their lives, and vice versa. When your children get to be adults, they cut their family off, and so they have nothing to do with their parents. That is painful too. And so I think estrangement is a really big value conflict that a lot of people don't talk about. I know that I'll just use myself for example. My girls, I told them not to be having babies till they were ready. And I always talked to them like that. I never made it about shame. It was about, I try to get them to understand about giving themselves a chance to learn and to be adults. I told them all the time that your brain never stops developing. It's still growing. Your brain isn't completely grown and developed till you're about 25 years old, 26. So I try to get them not to have babies till after that, but they chose to have babies early. And then they were really mad at me because I didn't over on the tacojas. I let my daughters be mothers to their children. And I only did that because when I had my children, I had them young. I didn't listen either. I had my kids young, but my mom, she overed on my kids. And me and my mom really fought over my kids. I was resentful to her because those were my kids and I wanted to raise them my way. And so, out of respect of how that was between me and my mom, I told my girls, when you have babies, those are your babies. I'm not going to over on them. But my girls, seeing society um, having babies and leaving them with their grandparents or extended family, my kids in turn were angry at me and said I was a lazy grandma or not a good grandma because I didn't over on my grandkids. But today, I'm pretty sure my girls are proud of themselves because they raised their own kids. I'm not overing on my tacojas, but that's a big value conflict. But the next part, the part two to all of that, is my kids are all adults now. And when we have a family conflict, like I have an older son who has no business in this situation because he's really smart and he had everything he needed. But for some reason, he chose to do meth. I just found this out. And so I scolded him. And so his sisters stuck up for him. And they're all mad at me right now. So that they're estranged from me, meaning they cut me off. They disown me. So I'm having heartbreak over that. But in all reality, they're all in their 30s and 40s, and that's okay. But this value conflict is something that people don't talk about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. So we'll move on to the next slide.
Actually, we have a few more people
Oh,
to.
okay, I didn't see that.
Jess Big Crow said boundaries from toxic people, even if they are family. And then Eileen said, I think of myself, there's value conflict occurs a lot when working with Washichus in different organizations or agencies. And I think I touched base on that too. And we do have someone who asked a question for you, Lakshi. Do you have any advice for a young person working with older generations that do not want to embrace change, tribal program level value conflict?
I would, how I did it in my life is I just listened, and if you listen, there's always a lesson to be learned. If anything, one of them I learned was not to be like them, and also to listen out of respect because they're older. You might not agree with them, but just listen. That's what I was taught by my parents to do. So I've never argued or anything, and I was always respectful of them. Some of them noticed it and they treated me different later on. They treated me more civilly and more in a civil way, but some of them are too set in their ways. It's kind of like the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So I've seen that a lot among people. So anyway, I hope that helped you. Anything else?
Oglala, Lakshi, that is it. So
We'll move on. So here are 4 fundamental components for effective conflict resolution. So you can resolve your difficult situations in a positive and constructive way before they go nuclear. Empathy is key. Don't abandon your self-respect. It's not about winning and losing. Maintain open communication. Go forward. Related blogs. So that's kind of like what I talked about just now about how I interacted with elderly people. Um, I see this a lot in places I worked where uh, things aren't talked about, things are pushed under the rug, and it tends to escalate when you do that. You don't address it. One of the things that I know that we've not always been that way, but one of the things I noticed in our society today as Lakota people, I can't speak to for Dakotas and Nakotas, but for Lakotas, one of the things I see is that we carry on grudges for generations and generations. And I think that wasn't always there because if we were that way long ago, we would not have survived. We survived because we learned to work together and put our differences aside, and we worked for the better of the community, and the better for a better for the whole people. And we valued our wotak here, our relationships with each other as relatives. And so those things kind of held us together, almost like a glue, held us together. So anybody have any comments on this part here? You're welcome to share.
we have a comment. Sandra said, I can relate to estrangement. I have one daughter who is married to an Italian guy. He has that white male superiority complex, and when I bring up his disrespectful behavior, she defends him. So I canceled my visit to them next summer. How can I reach her?
I think talk to her about our worldview, how we conduct ourselves. Like example would be yesterday, one of our son-in-laws, he's not native, he's not indigenous, and he talks to his mother-in-laws directly, and they get my wife and my her sisters are were trained by their mother as to live the traditional way. So they really get nervous, I could notice. And he came and sat down, and I was facing towards him, and he sat down right in front of uh, my wife. And so she got up and went the other way, and he kind of really looked at her like maybe he was thinking, she doesn't care for me, or maybe she doesn't like me, or but she was moving away because you don't do that. You don't sit right down opposite of your mother-in-law. Or does a mother-in-law sit down right opposite of a son-in-law, or a father-in-law in front of a daughter-in-law, and vice versa. So I remember when my older sisters got married and when their husbands came into the room, my mom would leave the room, but they knew that that was a taboo among our people. So they didn't take offense at it, but I one of my wife's other sisters was married to a non-native Washichu, and he said, "No, I'm going to talk to my mother-in-law because it would be told. I would think it's very disrespectful if I didn't talk to her or answer her if she asked me." But she was like an old-time woman, and she had never talked to him. But he would talk to her, and she wouldn't answer him, and kind of hide her face and look away. But I was raised in that way that not to do that. So I never talked to her and she never spoke to me. And so but I understood the reason why. So that people that don't know about our culture will do that, that's not in their culture to do that. So I hope that answered was it a question?
Yeah, just helping her reach her daughter.
Yeah, so that's how you would do it, is talk to her daughter about it, why it's that way, and then maybe she'll understand. Or maybe she wouldn't. I don't know. Any
Mhm.
comments on this slide? If not, we'll move on.
Won't be long.
Guess not. So this is a concept of the Lakota worldview. So um, one concept is I mentioned earlier is igluwashtepi, the concept of making amends. Oyate wotakwe kagapi, making of relatives. Oyate chanwashtepi, a resolution of peace and acceptance by both parties. Waryu WichhoÄan be gifts as part of restitution. So that was a part of our society, these things, the concept of making amends. And it was even in the spiritual ceremonies. So now many of us are familiar with Sundance. We all go to some Sundance somewhere. We learn from the Sundance leaders' teachings. One of the ways to igluwaste, making amends, was through the ceremony of dragging buffalo skulls. So this man, if he did something against a family or a person, and it was uh, it was looked at as devastating, So even to the point of taking a human life. So if this man did this and he wanted to make amends to this family, he would pierce on his back and drag buffalo skulls in the Sundance. But he wouldn't dance inside the holy circle. He would dance on the outside in the camp. And they say that if that family accepts his offering of making amends, they will come out and they will walk beside him as he's dragging the skulls. And then they would after he's done, when he broke loose from the skulls, then they would shake his hand and maybe even embrace him. And that showed that whatever conflict was there ended there, and you can't continue any kind of ill will or bad feelings. And then another one was Oyate Wotaku Kagapi, the making of relatives. So sometimes when there was conflict, they would come together as maybe it's two Tioshpayas, two families, and they would make each other relatives so that this behavior or whatever ill feelings would not continue into the future. And then Oyate Chanwashtepi, a resolution of peace and acceptance by both parties. So that would also be there. And there was men among us that were peacemakers. One of them was the chief that died at Wounded Knee 1890. The reason that Chief Red Cloud asked him to come down there was this reservation was about to erupt into war. So he said, come and make peace among the people, because half of them were fighting because they were against the ghost dance, and the other half were practicing the ghost dance. And there was actually clashing of people. So he came to make peace also with the cavalry being their presence here. He wanted to make peace with them, make sure that they knew everything was okay, and then so they could leave the reservation, because there was always that threat of conflict between the Lakotas, the people here, and the cavalry, which eventually happened. So that was why he was on his way here, because Chief Red Cloud promised him 100 head of horses if he came and he made peace. But they were stopped at Porcupine Butte and then taken to Wounded Knee. The next day was when the massacre happened. And then the last one is the WichhoÄan, gifts as part of the restitution. Any comments here on this part? Anybody want to add anything?
Lakshi,
Mm,
on Wayuha Wichakuya or Wachu, how do you say that?
WichhoÄan. WichhoÄan.
Gifts as part of the restitution. What would that look like traditionally, Lakshi?
Okay, say, and I'll get into that in one of the slides, but it's like to make amends, they would exchange gifts a lot of times, and then those, if you accept the gifts, then that's symbolic of you accepting the offer of peace, and that there will be no more conflict between your family and whoever they were in conflict with, or the family that was in conflict with your family. So that would be a part of that. So they say if you accept the gifts, then you're not supposed to. It's supposed to end there, I guess, so to speak. All right, we'll move on. So this is the story of Tashunke Wichko, and it's a story of conflict and the resolution. So what happened was Tashunke Wichko was in love with this young girl, and she was in love with him, and her name was Black Buffalo Woman. Katkanka Arpte Sapawi. So what happened is he fell in love with her, but she was promised to this man named No Water, and No Water took her while he was away on a war party, and married her, and exchanged the dowry, the gifts, for marriage. And so he was taken to the lodge of No Water and became his wife. He came back and he found out, and I guess he was heartbroken. They said he stayed in his teepee for several weeks, they said, without coming out. And so one day, she already had children with No Water, when one day she went and left with Crazy Horse to another camp, and then went on a hunting party with him. So No Water found out that his children were put among her relatives, and that she left with Crazy Horse. So he borrowed a pistol from a man, and he went looking for them. And he found them somewhere on the Tongue River in Montana. And he rushed into the teepee and shot Crazy Horse in the face and got his wife back. And so Crazy Horse laid in a coma for 3 days. Shot him in the face, right by the side of the face. In those days, the bullet was a lead ball. It wasn't like the bullets today we see. So it went under the cheek and along, and it exited outside behind his ear. So he had a real large scar there, I guess, and he had that till the day he died. So the people came back that were with Crazy Horse after he healed enough to make a journey. They came back to the camp. In the meanwhile, No Water took his people and left. So in the meantime, before that happened, the family of Crazy Horse and the family of No Water got together and they exchanged gifts, like in that ceremony. So Crazy Horse's family took the gifts and they gave gifts to No Water's family too, and so that there will be no conflict later on in the future. And here one day, Crazy Horse saw No Water out hunting by himself. So his anger got the best of him, and he went after him and he shot at him. So No Water fortunately had a faster horse, so he got away. And so the Inila Wota, the four old men that every final decision in traditional government in those days had the final say so what's going to happen. They met together in council for 4 days, and they were like a feasting society where people brought them food while they sat in deliberation and talked about an outcome. And then they had to come to a consensus. So they came to the consensus that Crazy Horse was a WichhoÄ'an Tampika, or in society today they call them shirt wearers. So they took his shirt from him because he endangered the people, they said, by taking another man's wife. They say that historically, if he accepted it, No Water, and just let her go, then they said he would have been the better man in the situation because he didn't let his jealousy and anger take the best of him. So they would say he's a strong man. Crazy Horse, by taking her, knowing she was married, they said almost caused a war among the Oglalas. So they said he wasn't fit to be a leader, and they took that shirt from him. That shirt is made out of elk hide, and it's has human hair on its scalps. And so he was one of four shirt wearers among the Oglalas. So they took him. They took his shirt from him at that time and unshirted him. So that's the story. How they took the gifts, but Crazy Horse tried to retaliate. So they took the shirt from him for that reason, and for also that he's supposed to be sworn to protect the people, but he almost caused a war right among the Oglalas. Any comments, questions on that?
Yes, we have Hattie here. Hold on. There you go. There you go, Tony.
I heard this story once a while back, and I never made any connection to it because it wasn't something I experienced in my own life. And here I went through something like that. And so now I understand. And I really, after going through something like that, I really was looking for elders in our community or even my peers, somebody who could talk to me and help me and guide me through this situation. And nobody
Mhm.
wanted to talk about it, or they didn't have anything to say, or the majority of the people all went through this and they didn't resolve the conflict or the issue. They just either stuffed it and continued on with their
Mhm.
partner, or else they totally disconnected and went a different direction. So it would be really nice if we somehow could figure out how to talk with people that go through this so that we could
Mhm.
be culturally relevant. And I think that would help because in Rosebud a few years back when we were having a real bad suicide pandemic, we surveyed
Mhm.
all the kids in our schools, and here that was the number one thing that bothered our kids was the parents were being infidelity with their partner. That's really
Mhm.
sad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big thing among our people. Because the children are the ones that hurt at the end. They're the ones that they kind of fall in the middle, and it's the parents and the grown-ups are too caught up in their feelings and emotions that they forget about the children. And that also happens with grief too. Like we're all crying around because we lost a loved one, and we forget about these young people and these children. They're hurting too, you know. That's their own chi or that's their tsumi, you know. But we don't recognize that we're all crying for ourselves, and we forget them. So they carry a lot of grief. The children. I I went with my wife to present at Rocky Ford School one time, and I think they were like seventh and eighth grade. And we posed the question, how many of you lost someone close this year? And it was like, I'd say 90% of the class raised their hands. So, and then another time, we gave a presentation, I and my wife at the School of Mines, and there was all like native children there from all over. And we started talking to them about grief and like that. And pretty soon one cried, another one cried, another. So pretty soon the whole room of young people were crying. And so there was some washichus there that were counselors and stuff. They didn't know what to do. They were all walking around. They had scared looks on their faces. But my wife told them, she said, it's good that they're crying. They need to release it. She said. So one washichu counselor said, things got heavy in there. He said, but it's true. We carry a lot of grief. Our children carry a lot of grief, and a lot of people they don't understand what grief is. A lot of times, these young people, because you can grieve for a relationship, you can grieve for people, you can grieve for a pet, you can grieve for women. I mean, children that are taken out of their homes and put in other homes. That's a form of grief too, because they're not no longer in their home. So that grief is really a big part of what is hurting our children, and also what Tojan said, the infidelity in families, because that they physically, the parents would physically fight and all of that. There's something here that on there. Can you see that, Tojan? It looks like an arrow right in the middle of the rider. I don't know what that is.
It looks like it was almost like supposed to be a video or something.
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't
scared
know.
to try it.
No, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm scared to try it. It might be Jimi Hendrix might pop up. Okay, so that ends our presentation today.
Wopila, like she,
Mm,
Wopila. I know that certainly makes you think about how we can be better at resolving issues in those traditional, the cultural relevance to how we used to. So that's why I was writing down those things and how we can be better relatives. Thank you.
yeah,
It's really
yeah.
helpful for me too. At this time, do we have any more questions or comments before like she Rick? We do have a few minutes before the hour. Yeah, folks saying Wopila, Wopila, Pilamia, Wopila Ate, Shicheshi Matt said.
Mm.
Oh, Tui Stephanie, Wopila,
Mm.
Wopila
Oh, children.
Tanka.
Mm.
This was good, Wopila.
Mm.
No questions, just Wopila Tanka Chiche from Olo staff. Thank you. Beautiful message, so powerful.
Mm.
It was. I think that this was a beautiful message today, and it certainly it does help all of us in our organization, tribal, non-tribal, of how to move forward through conflict. And we do have to face that head on. Sometimes it's hard, but you do have to talk things through, or like she talked about, it can escalate and get worse.
Mm.
Okay, well, no questions like she.
Mm.
And so, again, Wopila from us here at Friends of the Children-He Sapa, Lakviņa to Lakota. I know this is our last cultural teaching from funding from the South Dakota Humanities Council, but we're looking for opportunities for more. And so we'll continue to work with Lakshi, and he'll continue to help us with our youth and families. And Wopila to you, and we look forward to the sacred site visit this weekend and those teachings that come with it to help our youth and families. So,
Mm. Uh-huh. Doksha.
Doksha ke